When you have this mindset for success, it shows up in every area of your life. And now she's one of the top global coaches. Her name's Alexi Panos. I say to all my parents that I'm teaching, please teach your kids this mindset for success.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Adapt You podcast. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever asked yourself, I deserve more love in my relationship? Have you ever felt that way? Today's guest is going to help you answer some of the questions you may ask yourself. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, but I'm going to give you a couple questions that if you've ever asked this or know someone who asked this, maybe this is a good podcast for you. Do you desire an emotionally healthy partner for marriage and a family? Is that a question you've asked for yourself? Did you divorce a toxic partner and want to get back into the dating scene and love right and love better the next time? Have you asked yourself that? Are you in a toxic relationship or marriage right now today and are questioning whether you should stay or go? Or are you in the LGBTQ community and struggling with happiness, life, and love in relationships? If you've asked yourself any of these questions or questions like this, then you're listening to the right show, because our guest today, Riana Milne, is an expert in this arena and somebody that is going to share quite a bit of information for you. So I strongly encourage you to sit down and listen if you have asked yourself these questions or know somebody who has, because she really is fantastic at what she does as a therapist and helping people through trauma in their past to get them on the right path in their relationships. So with that said, let's get on to the show and let me introduce you to Riana. All right, everybody, I want to welcome Riana Milne to the show. Riana, welcome to the show. So pumped to have you on.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate it. Nice to be here. Thanks for asking me.
You are you're coming to us from Florida, it looks like.
Palm Beach County, another gorgeous day in Florida. I live in paradise. You can't complain that much.
Can't complain at all. So that little picture behind you is not really unrealistic, right? I mean,
well, it's actually taken from a trip I had in St. Bart's. I was sitting at a restaurant looking at that scene. I'm like, that's beautiful. Took a picture and I'm like, this is perfect for my Zoom background.
I love it. It's putting me at ease already. I want to go swimming. So Riana, as it mentioned in your introduction, I talked a little bit about briefly about what you do, but and what you do, I think, is so important because relationships, love, I mean, this is the basis of human existence, in my opinion, and really what makes us flow from day to day. Yet so many of us don't really understand it, don't understand how to manage it, struggle with relationships. And you're really the first individual I've had the opportunity to have on the show to talk about love and relationships with the level of expertise that you have. So help the listeners understand what it is that you do for your clients and for those who listen to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, 22 years of experience. I've helped adults and even kids, because I worked in every grade of the school district, to overcome childhood and love trauma, heal from that, to go on to create the life they desire and to have the love they deserve. And I have to work with them 4 to 6 months in a very research-based, comprehensive trauma recovery program. And it changes their entire lives. It's so beautiful to see the transition from fear-based negative thinking, being, and destructive behaviors in life, love, or even in business, to creative, consciously aware success in all those areas of their life. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
That's fantastic. And I think that a lot of us could relate to things that have happened in our past, or for those that we understand, or those that we know that things that happened in their past and how it affects us today. And I think a lot of us discount it, or brush it under the rug, or don't give it the attention that it needs. And that's the wrong thing to do. We don't realize, the harm it's causing us or the harm it's causing our loved ones. So help us unbox this a little bit more as far as what you do. So tell us a little bit about you and your story first, so we understand, okay, how did you get into this? Because I'm always very interested. How did you land here? Where did it start? Because I think when I read your bio, you actually had a talent agency.
I did.
Yeah, in
I'll
your
go back to the
20s.
beginning.
Perfect.
Well,
Let's
when
go
I
back.
was a teenager, it starts really here. I was terribly bullied in middle school and high school. And I asked my mom if I could go see a counselor because I was sad and depressed and started getting quiet and isolated. And she said, no one in this family will ever go see a counselor. It was considered a shameful. So then I said in defiance, I'm going to then grow up and become one. So since my teen, I was reading Psychology Today magazine to try and help understand and solve my own problems and gain more self-esteem, and Teen magazine because I started modeling at age 12 and 13. And that was really the one thing that saved me and raised my self-esteem and confidence. And then I had a traumatic event happen when I was 16. My very best childhood friend that lived down the street from me, we were best of buddies, named Michael, was killed by a drunk driver, and we were 16. So that loss was the first death I experienced, and it was huge for me. And I started reading philosophy from the spiritual masters like Wayne Dyer, the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, the readings of Tony Robbins, Marianne Williamson. I started studying the Course of Miracles. And the spiritual philosophy really helped me to heal. And then I experienced another death, the death of my best friend at Penn State, who was murdered by her boyfriend. And it really makes you look at life differently as like, how much time do I have left? And I will never tolerate toxic relationship. I will leave before it gets to this point. So it does make you different when you go through different traumas. Back in the day, you get married early. And I actually, had a love trauma from husband one and divorced early. But I had two amazing daughters from that marriage. To age 26, I opened up my own model and talent company and school with my first month's rent and a lot of faith and belief that I could make this happen in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is not a modeling town. But within 6 months, I won an international award for educational excellence. And within the year, I won the top award for Model and Talent School of the Year. And I started with a class of 4 people. Within 6 months, I had 24 and a waiting list. So it was a fun business I had for about 10 years. And then I always wanted to be a counselor. So I sold that off and went back to school in my late 30s and got a triple master's in applied clinical and counseling psychology and graduated in the year 2000 and opened up my own practice called Therapy by the Sea in South Jersey. But as you build a practice, I was doing other work. So this is when I started working in the school systems as a trauma coach, a counselor called a SAC counselor, student assistance counselor. And I worked at every grade level, kindergarten through college. And then I was working at AtlantiCare, a hospital mental health unit for kids ages 5 to 19. Then I was working in a rehab center as a LCADC. One was for teenagers and one was women from the prison system. So despite the ages, the populations, the background, the culture, the races of the people that I worked with, these top 10 traumas kept coming up over and over again as impacting and ruining their lives. And then later in life, I experienced another love trauma with a man I did deeply love. And his last comment to me was, I don't know what's the matter with me. Why do I sabotage everything I love? And I said, I don't know. And at this time, I had my triple master's. Childhood trauma was not taught to psychotherapists. We didn't even hear that term. And this is 2012. And I said, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out why you have this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde lifestyle. And it was uncovered in his school. So he lost his job, his reputation, our marriage, ran out of town, left me to heal myself because I had 7 therapist friends and we never heard of these things that somebody did like this. Like, what is this? Nobody knew. So my research led me to understanding that childhood trauma, when it's not healed, impacts an adult's choices in life, love, and business. Years later, 2016, the Kaiser Permanente study did a study on childhood trauma with over 17,000 people on how unhealed trauma impacts people in early death and disease, which is great. And it was finally legitimized my research, because I didn't have those numbers of people, just the numbers and years of experience with my population I worked with. But in 2012, I developed a childhood trauma checklist, which were the top 10 traumas I was seeing over and over and over again with my clients within the populations I worked with. And with my ex-husband, it wasn't covered. He had 9 of the 10 traumas with severity levels of about 8 to 9. And that led to my #1 best-selling book, this research called Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve. And I sent him a copy of the book and he goes, oh my God, put my picture on the cover. I am the poster child of this. And thank God you figured out what was the matter with me, because I didn't know why I sabotaged everything that was important to me and that I loved. And that was the beginning of our healing, me personally, and me in forgiveness and spiritual love, that I could release him in love and learn. And I'm like, this information is so important. And then I started recognizing the trauma patterns in my clients at my therapy center, and I could help them heal and overcome. So I worked with singles and couples and kids, all ages, like I said, all backgrounds. And this was really helping to finally heal people from ongoing anxiety, bouts of depression, negative fear-based thinking, to heal those original traumas that they endured, recognize the patterns, change them, and go on to live a very full, conscious, aware life. And I did that holistically, healing mind, body, and spirit. So that's how I got into it. And now in 2017, I decided to go global with this. And a lot of my research is in my coaching programs. I have a notebook that's 150 pages based on the research. I Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams books. And then how I coach my clients is very individualized based on the traumas that they endured and how it shows up for them as an adult. So then we heal that and change their lives. That's how it works. And I do it virtually now since 2017.
Which is great, which obviously worked out in 2020 that you were virtual, right?
Yeah, nothing really changed for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah, definitely a nice benefit. So it is amazing to me that the number of people this probably affects, right? And you talk about these 10 traumas, which I'd love to get into what they are, because I'm inclined to think that some of them are going to be ones that are maybe subtle. I don't want to say subtle, but most people would think like trauma. When I hear the word trauma, I'm thinking, I was molested. I was beaten, something really awful. While I'm sure.
Well, that's what they would call big T trauma. That's what most people think trauma is. I suffered, broken bones in a car accident when I was 10 and missed a year of school, or yes, I was raped or molested. These are big T traumas. And yes, those are important. But the little T traumas are those small repetitive incidents, mostly emotional, that happen over time. And the science shows that the impact on the brain and the body cells and the nervous system is exactly the same as big T and little T traumas, exactly the same. The body can't decipher the differences. And the research showed in 2012 that 90% of people had at least 3 to 4 traumas on my list. But in 2021, the research, and I continue my trauma classes because I'm a certified clinical trauma professional, and I always have to continue my education for that. And it's found in 2021 that 100% of us have experienced childhood trauma now. So that's why it's important for people to know what they are, recognize them in themselves and their partners. And this will then help identify some of the patterns that are causing them problems in their relationships.
Okay. So let's get into these, because I'm fascinated to hear what they are. I'm sure the listeners are as well. So we can start to identify with ourselves personally, or those that we're in a relationship with.
And I'll go, I wanted to also mention this goes through at least 3 family generations. So if you find you have trauma, so did your parents, so did your grandparents. Okay. That's part of the research. And as I go through this list, I want to make sure that this is not about being angry and blaming your parents right now, because again, they had come from trauma. So we have to look at their lives with understanding, which we call family systems. And then we also have to look at it without shame or guilt around ourselves, because we were just innocent children and part of an environment we had no control over, right? So we're trying to look at this list factually, because you can't change what you don't know or understand or acknowledge or understand. So that's why we have to understand these. So if you're able to write these down, and if not, listen to this later and I can tell you where you can get the free ebook that includes this list. So first one is having any addiction in your family from your caretakers or your parents. So as a drug and alcohol addictions counselor, I named 12 of these. So it's drugs, alcohol, sex, meaning you knew your parent was a cheater, porn, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, workaholism, and social media or computer addiction, meaning you're always on doing games or on the computer and kind of ignoring the child. Scrolling, so those are the top 12 that I name now. And as I go along, some people have had heard of the ACE test, and my test was so different from theirs. Like they're there, if your parents had did drugs or alcohol and stopped, I'm like, what about the other 10 addictions? You know, where'd those go? So I'll name how my test is very different from theirs, and that was big, profound difference in mine. Second is verbal messaging. And this would be watching your parents fighting a lot, yelling, screaming, or they yelled at you. But I also added includes not hearing the words, I love you, or not hearing compliments. And this was big because a child is left with saying, like, I can never do anything good enough. I never hear good job, kiddo, even though I got third. I tried my best, but they're all angry I didn't get first. You know, things like that, where you're always feeling like put down or you don't measure up. And those are verbal messages. Number 3 is emotional abuse or neglect. Number 4 is physical abuse, any kind of hitting or beating, rape or molestation. And again, these childhood traumas can happen inside or outside of the home. It's just your childhood life, right? So in your experiences. The next one is abandonment. This was not on their test, their ACE list at all. And I was shocked because all my kids I worked with had so much abandonment issues. It was very prevalent. So I named 2 types of abandonment, fault and no fault abandonment. So a no fault abandonment would happen if a parent happened to die early, if a parent leaves the home to go serve their country in war. And I was in an elementary school at the time where our kids' parents were serving in Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And they would be checked out emotionally. All they could worry about is my mom or dad coming home alive. That's all they cared about. Their cortisol and nervous levels were so up that their learning ability goes down when cortisol is up. So many of these kids were misdiagnosed ADHD and put on medication. And I am an advocate for no, they're coming from traumatic situations or traumatic home life. And this, I was a big advocate for that. So that's another one that's no fault. Another no fault is if your parent happens to work away from home, but this is how they support their family. They're rarely there. And that was when I could recognize in myself. I didn't know where my dad was much of the time when I was growing up. We kids did not. My mom did not. Years later, we get letters from Ronald Reagan and William Casey thanking my dad for his many years with the FBI and CIA. So here I had dad, James Bond, which is cool. And when he was home, we loved him and he was great, but he was barely home. So I finally came to understand why. And then there's fault abandonment. And that would be like never being involved in your child's life, being involved if the couple is together and then the couple breaks up or the marriage divorces, and then you're rarely around the child. Or even if there's an emotional abandonment, meaning the parent is in the house, but totally checked out. They don't go to their kids' sporting events. They barely talk to the kid. They come home from the office and go to the home office and just sit there at dinner and barely talk. This is called an emotional abandonment, just not connected. Okay, the next one is kids from the foster care system. That was a huge miss with the ACE study. I worked with those kids at the mental health ward. I knew how they were hurting with so much trauma. Kids that were adopted, wondering why their initial mom or dad gave them up, or kids that had to go live in another person's house. Even if it was grandma or aunt and uncle and the parents couldn't keep them. So that's trauma number 6. Trauma number 7, many people can identify with. It's called personal trauma. And that's if you were ever bullied as a kid, you might have been born with a medical issue and teased for that. You could have come out as a gay or lesbian teen and not accepted or teased by your family or peers. You could have been the only African-American student in an all-Caucasian school. So there's so many ways that people can identify with trauma number 7, not fitting in, not measuring up, not feeling good enough. Okay, the next one is sibling trauma. Your sibling might have been mean and bullied you. They might have been born with a medical issue, so that commanded more of mom's and dad's time. Or even most often, I would say people identify as their sibling as the golden child, the favored one. So they could have been the star athlete, the star student, or more handsome or beautiful, but they just got more of mom's and dad's attention and time. Next one's trauma 9, which has 2 parts. The first part was the original trauma 9, which is family trauma. So this is like our military families that have to travel every 2 to 4 years, move to a new place here in the US. That uploads the child and puts them in a new school every time. It could have been growing up in a dangerous neighborhood or around a lot of lack messages like, no, we don't have the money for that. Stop asking for things. We don't have the money for heat. Just hearing a lot of lack messages. Could have been a family member was incarcerated. So those are some family traumas. And then the other one, trauma 11, I brought down and I had to put it in there because it's community trauma. And where I was growing up, there was very little community trauma, or we didn't hear about it. But everyone now is experiencing the community COVID pandemic. That is a community trauma. Also, this is our Mother Nature events, our floods, fire, hurricanes, mudslides. These are coming much more prevalent with our global warming. It is also our mass shootings and our school shootings. So unfortunately, community trauma had to be part of the top 10. And then number 10 is mental health issues in mom or dad. Now, us baby boomers, like I said, our parents really didn't go to counseling. So we kind of have to guess if our parents struggled with things. But the most difficult for children to navigate around is bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So borderline is erratic moods. When they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're horrid, and you never know what you're going to get. These people would flip out with anger at the littlest thing that no one would get upset about. So it leaves a kid walking on eggshells and really makes them highly anxious as adults. Bipolar is manic depressive. So depression can show up as anger, checking out emotionally, or extreme fatigue. And the manic phase, people think, oh, that's the high and happy one. It could be, but it's often tied to an addiction, like it's gambling spree, spending spree, eating binge, alcoholic binge. So those are the top 10 traumas that I name on my childhood trauma checklist.
It's funny, as you're going through these, I think you stated earlier that nearly 100% of people, or you said 100% of people have had some form of this trauma. And I can see why. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here, and there's no perfect upbringing, family situation. There's always something, right? And all these that you list at varying degrees of severity. I never thought something as simple as having a parent that just happens to be, sucked into social media, just completely, I mean, I've been guilty of this.
And then they often put their children on machines. I call them machines, the little games that the little kids play.
Yes.
And then they grow up to be adults and don't have social skills. They can't do job interviews or not excelling in the workforce because they lose the social aspect skills that, the baby boomers grew up without machines, right? So we have this confidence in social negotiation and navigation of right and wrong. And when kids just isolate in their machines because their parents are, they're not getting many of the lessons that should be taught during childhood.
Agreed. Yeah. And it's becoming more and more difficult as it seems that the teens and the kids, they just become so beholden to those devices.
Yeah.
And it's hard to rip it out of their hands, but to think of the damage that it's doing. But this list is profound. And so talk to me about what you do in terms of sitting with a client or of yours and trying to assess this, like what's the process that they go through, just generally speaking, with this list?
Well, the first thing people do to meet with me, they meet with me for 1 hour. And during the time of COVID, I have an extreme special. It's like $47, but it's a $497 1-hour assessment because I do 5 tests. Really simple. Yes, no, like this one. Yes or no. You had it or you didn't have it.
Yep.
5 simple assessments, but I've been doing this for so long, putting these puzzle pieces together that within 1 hour, when I see what their childhood traumas are and then how they're showing up today in life, love, and business, I put the system together and say, because of this in your past, that led to you choosing this partner, which is leading to these complications, right? So the first thing is identifying, what's going on for them. And again, you can't change what you don't know or understand. So many people come to me, it's like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, which happened to me at while I was going through that second love trauma. It's like, why am I attracting people that are hurting me when I'm such a nice person? I don't get it. Right. And again, this was before I even knew about childhood traumas. Nobody knew about it. And that's why most therapists don't even handle this topic. It's a real specialty area. So the first thing is that 1 hour assessment. And then they, depending on the severity levels and what they're going through right now in their life, like if I have a single person, but has a very toxic, abusive relationship going on, they're going to need more time with me. And they're, and I'm very supportive and watching, as they disengage from the toxic abusive partner. So it really depends on each person's story and what they're looking for. But let me go into some of the patterns that I look for that show up in the adult relationship, because that will make more sense to people.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So in love relationships, we'll start there. If you see jealousy and control, that's usually jealousy comes from a lack of trust and not feeling good about yourself. It usually comes from trauma 7, personal trauma, and trauma 2, the messaging you might have heard, the put downs, you're not good enough, you look fat in that, change your clothes, things like that. There's verbal messages. So jealousy is that lack of self-confidence, lack of self-esteem. And, you can get very anxious if your person's talking to someone else, if they're away for a period of time, and that comes down to jealousy. Control, again, you don't feel good enough, so you're trying to nitpick and control your partner's every move. This can come from that jealousy or having a very chaotic childhood where you had no control over your upbringing and what was going on in that household. So as an adult, you crave control. Now, this could work in your favor in the business world where you're controlling everything you need to do and you become meticulous in business, which is a good trait. But if you start nitpicking your partner and changing them and no, do this, do that, you don't look nice, or, you start nitpicking your partner, you're going to whittle away the love. And that's where a lot of the anger and toxic stuff comes in. I have a lot of women saying that, I met a guy that manipulated me and lied to me. Where's that come from? Again, lying comes from a fear of being punished. So let's say there was the angry alcoholic father a son came home with an F on his paper. He goes, oh my God, I'm going to be beat over this one. So he changes it into an A and has to get the paper signed. He goes, oh my God, that worked. So if I lie, I save myself from being hit today. So he learns lying works. They learn manipulation. If I manipulate and charm my teacher, maybe I won't get a D, I'll get a C on my report card, or become the class clown. That's a real sign that there's not a lot of love at home. So they use comedy to try and get kids to laugh and like them. Impulsivity usually comes from someone that comes from lack. And as an adult, they may have become successful. And it's like, well, I want the red sports car. I deserve it. I work hard. I'm not telling my wife. She can deal with it when I drive it up in the driveway. So impulsivity, feeling like you deserve, despite how it could hurt someone else or the family. You do what you want, which is out of ego and narcissism. So that impulsivity can be one of the top things that really ruin relationships, making risky choices that destroy the trust in the relationship or hurt your partner. Perfectionism is one that's really big. Women do a lot of people pleasing. So if there was an older daughter and she was in charge of getting the kids ready for school and the mother had a hangover, she would do everything so the mom wouldn't yell, people pleasing, trying to be perfect. And then she might hear a thanks, hon, as she takes the kids off to the bus stop. So she learned to give and get love by being perfect or people pleasing. And as an adult woman, then this is when I hear, I do everything for my husband and my kids. They do nothing for me. They don't love me like I love them. She's a very burnt out woman that is angry and resentful, and rightfully so. So we have to work with her boundaries and learning to say no. If they try to say no, they feel very guilty about it. Anyone that had abandonment issues, this can lead to clinginess, anxiety in their relationship, reaching out for attention. If your partner said no to intimacy that night, let's say a woman said, hon, I'm just too tired. Let's maybe look at that for this weekend. He goes off to the cafe in the morning and flirts with the waitress to get his ego fulfilled because his wife happened to say no, she wasn't feeling up to it. So this whole ego thing, or people that are chronic cheaters, comes from a lack of self-esteem and, a lack of respect of the partnership. Abandonment issues can also lead to codependent relationships, something we call RRS, relationship repetition syndrome, where let's say you're in a toxic marriage, you break up. You read 100 self-help books, you go on all these podcasts and summits, and it's like, I'll get it right next time. And then you pick another toxic partner and then another one. I usually get them by round 3. It's like, what am I doing wrong? And that usually comes from some forms of abandonment issue, that toxic relationship. Or another example of that is your conscious awareness says, this person's no good for me. I know they're toxic. I love them, but I know they're toxic. I got to break up with them. So you break up and then they're able to whittle their way back into your life. It's usually the time period's 10 to 14 days. They come back, you get back together, and then you break up again, and then, back together. So that cycle from the research shows that happens about 7 times. And then finally, the more emotionally healthy person is like strung out. It's like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. So there's more. There's like 24 combinations. That's maybe about 10 of them.
Yeah, I can imagine sitting down with a client and having to unravel that. You've got so much experience in doing this as you're just rattling them off, and they all made sense to me as you were kind of going through them, as I'm sure they did the listeners as well. Yeah. Because we've all had similar experiences with people in our lives that possess these types of characteristics that you talked about: narcissism, jealousy, trust issues, whatever the case may be. But I think a lot of us have never really stopped to think, well, why? Why are that way? And maybe empathize with them a little bit to try to understand. And I think that helps us, as I'm sure you'll get into, it helps us forgive them and be able to move on from the pain that particular relationship may have caused, right? Yeah. Because you're dealing with people that obviously come to you because I think you said it was usually the third bad or toxic relationship. And they're like, why do I keep, finding the bad boy or this toxic individual? By the time you sit down with them and you kind of dissect not only their childhood, right, traumas, but I would imagine you also go into who they were in a relationship with as well to give them understanding, right? Because once we understand it,
we can change the patterns.
You can change the pattern. So talk about that segue, right? Where you enlighten people as to like, okay, here's what happened to you. Here's what happened to the individual that you were in a relationship with. Here's why it didn't work. And how do you get them to
well, we have to look at
all about change.
Yeah, we have to look at the other aspects too. How's it showing up in their life? So personally, they could have ongoing anxiety, bouts of depression, difficult controlling their emotions, trouble recognizing their emotions, or when they're emotionally triggered and they don't have good coping skills, or they lash out in anger. They're very sensitive to stress and take things personally. They might have excessive worry, constantly worrying and trying to micromanage things, or a sense of hopelessness or fear. It can show up in health disorders like eating disorders, drinking too much alcohol, not getting a good night's sleep, shorter lifespan, like the Kaiser study, and early disease, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, poor self-esteem, low self-esteem. So these things then can also interfere in business. So very often these people will talk about feeling stuck. They can't grow beyond this. So they're saying, I hate my job, but I'm afraid to quit because it's a regular paycheck. Or someone might try, working from home, especially during COVID. There were so many startups and so many people quit within the year. They think it's going to be easy working from home. It's not. It's a lot of work growing a business. And then they go so far, but they're afraid to invest in the coach that they need to grow their business. I invested in 12 coaches to go global because I knew that's what I needed. And you have to be willing to say, I'm making this financial investment because I have the faith that it will pay off. And I have the courage to do what I'm asked to do for my coach. Right. So it's the ability to say yes to yourself and not say, no, I'm afraid, because what if it doesn't work out? So if you have that kind of mindset that you're afraid to take those positive risks that help you to grow and feel amazing about yourself, then that's called being stuck. So there's so many ways that this shows up in life and love. And then in business, other ways it can show up as having a tyrant boss, or a very competitive employee, like a coworker that's always trying to belittle you to make themselves look better. Again, the fear of growing a business. You get so far, then you stop, or you sabotage yourself. How many times have you heard people say, I'm going to write a book? And they sit down and write 10 pages and they never finish it because there's like, nobody will read it. Nobody will want this. Or they don't have the fortitude, the mindset to complete their goals and dreams. So these are all things that I work with, depending what's showing up for that person. So looking at their job, are you happy in your job? Are you feeling healthy? How's your relationship with your kids, with your family members? I mean, I have to look at their entire, what we call life wheel. And that's in module 2. Module 1 is dissecting the childhood trauma piece, really doing a deep dive. And trauma 2 is now, what is the life you desire? And we do the wheel, and then they go around and put a percentage of where they are before they started their coaching. And, you'll see they're at 10, 20%. By the time they graduate 4 to 6 months later, those numbers are 90 to 95%. So we work on that whole wheel and chopping away at their goals and dreams to make sure they come into fruition for their life. So that's what I do. Yeah. And it's interesting because I was teaching the mindset for success to my models, actors, singer, dancers who are from Erie, PA, which is a very small town. And I happened to move up there. I'm from Philly. I'm a Philly girl. and South Jersey. But, I moved up there
hear it in your
marriage. Yeah, still have a little Philly accent. And, people there, you're crazy. No one's going to go to a modeling school in the area. And I said, it's commercial real people. Anyone can do the talent field. So, here's a story of, I had a big sized model, plus size model, we call them BBW, big, beautiful women. Jennifer came to me as a size 22. She goes, I'd really love to model. My family's laughing at me. They're like, you're fat. Why would you throw your money away on modeling? And she's like 22 years old, but she was really beautiful inside and out. And I said, Jen, if you work with me, can we get you to a size 16, 18? Are you willing to do that work? And she said, yes. I said, because there is plus size models, and I will teach you the mindset to do whatever it takes so you can be successful. Long story short, she made a fortune with Ford special sizes. And so whatever people dream to be, they can do. I mean, my daughter wanted to be a pop singer at 15 when Christy Aguilera and Britney Spears was out there. And I said, so let's do the work to make you a pop singer. Everybody would tell her, you're crazy. You can't do that. But I did have her in singing lessons. She did grow up in my model and talent school. They were modeling my girls since they were 4. And she sings on 3 multi-platinum CDs as one of the, with the top artists of her time when she was in her teens. And then she went on to do television hosting because she wanted to. And she went on to be a top model. And she went on to build water wells in Africa starting at the age of 20. I think they have like 16, 18 water wells now. So when you have this mindset for success, it shows up in every area of your life. And now she's one of the top global coaches. Her name's Alexi Panos. So, I say to all my parents that I'm teaching, please teach your kids this mindset for success. So this formula I've been using since my 20s, learning much from the spiritual masters that I studied in my teens and my 20s. And now I tie it in to help heal the trauma and create that life they desire. And then the second half of the training is having the love they deserve. So I work with single people who are afraid to get out and date after toxic relationships, or haven't dated after a 30-year marriage, or keep dating and finding toxic people and they can't get beyond the pattern. And I work with couples, and straight and LGBTQ, straight and couples. And for the couples, I have to individually help them heal from their childhood traumas. And then second is understand their partner's traumas. Third, how they're triggering each other. And fourth, teach them a new way to communicate around these traumas. So now that they become a team and each other's best friends when an issue comes up. And they learn totally how to communicate around it, something nobody has taught us, not at home, not in high school, not in any of our colleges, and certainly not in a triple masters of psychology where I should have learned it. So these are some of the skills that I teach my singles and my couples.
And it's amazing because your systematic approach to it and the system that you've created, as you sat there and just described it and explained it, it makes complete and total sense, from the dissection of childhood traumas to getting to understand how they are and the reason they act, why someone acts in a certain way. And then from there, be able to understand that, identify it, and change it on the path to, building the confidence and that successful lifestyle that they want, to have the confidence to be able to really leapboard them and springboard them, should I say, into something that is a better lifestyle. Because you talk about some of the effects that it has on people in terms of the stress and how that physical stress can manifest in autoimmune and all these other types of diseases, depression, and how that affects your love, your love life and your business, and just everything. Sucks, right? Everything sucks. Yeah. So how do you, you basically,
that's all that unconscious fear-based negative thinking. And even false assumptions about life, your partner, business, everything, which is we call the unconscious or uneducated side. And I teach them to live in love and light, which is a spiritual concept, and to be fully conscious aware of what they say, they do, they write, how they act. Everything is thought of before they do. And most people live totally unaware, unconscious.
off the trigger,
Totally.
based off exactly based off subconscious patterns that were conditioned
Right.
over time and a habit. So it is amazing because most people's minds, you're right, they do operate 95% in the subconscious. And that's why people repeat doing the same dumb things over and over again until you're made aware of it. And honestly, Riana, this is the reason I started this podcast, was because I had that epiphany. I found, and you said them earlier, Tony Robbins, like a lot of us have, and, began that journey of self-awareness and self-dissection and really started to break it down and go, oh, that's why
we sure need more males doing it. A
lot of us don't.
When I train one of my men, I'm like, oh my God, I want to duplicate you to 1,000 different guys for all the women looking for spiritually and personally aware, consciously aware men. Like, when they go through this, my men excel in business, man. Once they learn this, they triple their income within 6 months of working with me. So do my women. But, the men come in for one or two things because they're nitpicking their wife and they keep fighting, and then their whole life changes, and they're just such wonderful people. When my graduates are done, that, they just wish that they could meet someone who's equally consciously aware. It's so important today.
It is. I think women inherently are more in touch and connected with who they are and are willing to express themselves. So I can see that being a majority of your clients, where men were inherently, through social conditioning, to suppress their emotions, to suck it up, to, don't share your feelings. And I did that for many years until I realized, well, wait a second. The entire reason why I do anything in life is to do one thing, and that's to feel, right? Mm-hmm. If you really break it down, why do I go to work? To make money so I can maybe go have a nice dinner, to taste something because it feels good, or to go see a movie that's funny because I want to laugh, right? It's all about feeling. Or
feel your purpose, right? We're all human on this world for a reason. What is our purpose? So work should feed your purpose, right? And that raises your self-esteem and confidence, and you're helping the human condition in some way. So I think purpose is really an important part of that. But yes, unfortunately, how a lot of men do behave is what is modeled and taught to them. So if they were told, keep your mouth shut, I don't want to hear your opinion, or he would get whacked or punished or grounded for an extra month for doing what they did wrong initially and couldn't talk about their feelings. They learned, I better shut down and say nothing, or I'm going to be more punished. So that patterning, they bring into their love relationship, and this becomes that guy that could be passive aggressive. The wife is just, let's just talk about it. And he can't, he feels so sick inside. The fear is there to be able to talk about his feelings or his emotions. And he learned, I should shut down. And then maybe he'll lash out 2 days later, with anger, because he can't express himself. So yes, we have to beat those norms. We call this normalized behavioral patterns that were taught to you when you were young. You developed a coping mechanism to survive in your kid's mind, as your childlike mind. It's like, then I won't talk and then I won't get hurt. You became that, and then these normalized patterns just become toxic or dysfunctional as an adult, and they ruin your adult love relationship. So we have to break those patterns and norms.
And they're subconscious at that point, right?
Yes.
They're just ingrained. You just do them automatically.
Correct.
And that's hard to stop, like you said, until you bring awareness to it. So how do your program, you talk about graduates, you talk about it's a very structured program.
Yes.
So how do people, we're ending getting towards the end of the podcast. I want to let you tell people how they get in contact with you to get into this program, because it's of tremendous value. So how do we find you? How do we get in contact with you?
First of all, I want to encourage everyone. I mean, we talked about a lot of the bad stuff, right? But just know there's 100% healing from this. And I've been doing this work for 22 years. And for my couples, I mean, I'm an officiant as well. So when I married couples in 2006 and 8 and 10, they are still together. And they walked in my practice with an extremely toxic relationship. So I want to give you hope that there is life beyond this and anyone can do this work. My oldest client came to me at 73 years old. I would just say, don't wait. But he had 4 divorces and he goes, I'm going to die alone. And I said, are you willing to learn this? And he goes, yes. And he's been with a fabulous lady for 5 years. And he goes, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. So I've got to encourage you that there is hope and love beyond what you're going through today. So to meet with me, or get my free information, start at my website. It's my name, rianamilne.com. And on the homepage, you'll find the free ebook that you can download that goes into childhood and love trauma more and how to heal it. There's free book chapter downloads of my books, Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams. Live is about the mindset for success, and love is about emotionally healthy, evolved, and conscious love relationships. So first 60 pages there. My podcast is Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. I have 108 shows. My YouTube channel, I think I have 230 videos and audios there. What else? 4 free love tests on my website. So there's tests for singles and couples. The childhood trauma checklist is there as well. So all of that, again, is at my website, rianamilne.com. Great place to start. Lots of articles too. And I put a lot of free information out there for many years to help you in your growth and transformation.
Awesome. We'll make sure that in the show notes, we have all the links to what you just described, and also the dedicated podcast page. We'll have links to everything that you just described as well, so people can get in contact with you. Last question. I always ask this of guests because there's a lot of information that we just covered in the better part of the last hour. And, if people, let's say they forgot everything you just said, except for one thing that they could take with them to help them become the better version of themselves based off what you do, what would that be? That one thing?
It would be something I say over and over again. You can't change what you don't know, acknowledge, or understand. And today is the day. It's time to create the life you desire and to have the love you deserve. Don't wait.
Love it. Sage words. Thank you so much, Riana, for being on the show today. Tremendous value. And we definitely need to have you back because I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Adapt You podcast. We hope that today's show gave you the inspiration, tools, and resources, and just motivation to become and improve and change yourself on your path and on your journey to becoming the absolute best version of yourself. Now, that said, today's episode is brought to you by Adapt Media Agency, a full-service digital marketing agency based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, servicing customers across the globe. So whether you're a small startup business or a large business looking for digital marketing needs, Adapt Media Agency is there to help you with things such as website development, videography, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube advertising, social media management, search engine optimization, pay-per-click advertising. I can go on and on and on, but anything digitally marketing related that is going to help you grow your brand and change the way that you're interacting with your companies, Adapt Media Agency is that company for you. So if you want to learn more information, you can see our links in the mentions below or go to www.adaptmediaagency.com for more information. So thanks again for listening to the show. We hope you had an amazing experience. If you like this show and you felt it did a great job for you, if you're listening to us, over iTunes or one of the podcast channels, please leave us a review. It really helps us grow our brand and grow the show to deliver you greater guests and greater content. And if you're watching on YouTube, please pound that like button, hit the subscribe, and so that way you don't miss another episode here of the Adapt You podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.